and welcome to a new edition of In the District. Today, we're sitting down with New York State Comptroller Thomas Dinapoli. We'll discuss his early beginnings, the most recent Economic South Bronx report, how you can tap into unclaimed funds, and how the city should proceed ahead of the mayor's recent fiscal announcement. I'm Brittany Aubain, and this program is brought to you from BronxNet's brand new Media and Technology Studios at La Centrale in the South Bronx. Comptroller Dinapoli, thank you so much for joining us.
Brittany, it's great to be with you, and what a beautiful studio you have here, BronxNet La Centrale. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So yeah, let's get into La Centrale. You just took a tour right before you sat down. You got to meet some of the crew. You got to see, just all the great things we got going on here. What are your thoughts?
It's an impressive facility, and more important than the bricks and mortar, a great team here. And it's wonderful to see how, for the community, it really empowers young people who want to get into a career, related to broadcasting. What a great resource right here, not only for learning, but for servicing the community as well. And to have a state-of-the-art facility like this right here at La Centrale here in the South Bronx, it really speaks to the strength of this community broadly. And I think it was a very smart move on the part of BronxNet to be located right here. So I'm really impressed. I wish I had this kind of a resource when I was growing up in my community. And we need to celebrate the great history for decades that BronxNet has been servicing the community, and to be able to do it in an enhanced way with an updated state-of-the-art place like this, wow, it's a wow factor.
Well, thank you so much for that. And yes, our crew is absolutely amazing. So with that, let's talk a little bit about media literacy, right? With the importance of it at BronxNet, we are very big on education. So can you just kind of discuss, from your perspective, the importance of media literacy and just why a facility like this here in the South Bronx can actually be a great move for the community?
Information is power in our society, and media has such an important role to play in that, and not without some controversy these days, right? In terms of how responsible is the media, how do you access information, reliable information, the impact of social media generally. So I think the importance of kind of community programming that's offered from a facility like this is a important, credible resource for the community. I think in terms of people who want a career and learn about the various aspects, not just doing the forward-facing work like you're doing, but not everybody understands what's behind, what goes into this set and this kind of a program. And the opportunity, not just for a hobby or an interest, but to be an actual career, I think is quite incredible. And given the changes in the technology that we're seeing, it's ever changing, right? So education being up to date, having the access to resources like this, the collaboration that BronxNet has with the higher education community here in the Bronx. I mean, all of this feeds into having a competent, media literate cadre of people that can help make sure that the larger community is having access to services and knowing where to find credible information. I mean, I think that's the hardest thing. When I think of something like media literacy, it's like how do folks navigate all the different sources of information these days through the different kinds of media? It's challenging for folks. So this is just such an important and very valuable resource you have right here.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, it does take a village, and just this little village we have right here on the hub. So speaking of, recently today, you held a press conference on the South Bronx report and some of these findings. So can you talk about, some of the key findings in jobs and economic improvement, and what were the key findings?
I think if I would want to use one word to sum up what we found, it would be the word resilience. I think that's really what typifies the profile that we put out on the South Bronx. So we do periodically what we call economic snapshots on different neighborhoods in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And, some folks, I'll mention Councilman Raphael Salamanca particularly said to me, Tom, could you do an updated picture on what's happening in the South Bronx? And so that gave us the idea that it was time for us to do a drill down on the data that we have. A lot of it's economic data, but different kinds of demographic data as well, coming out of the census, different economic reports, labor reports, and so on. And so today we released the snapshot. And it really is just a picture in time. It's not meant to be the final word because communities are always evolving and changing, but really meant to be a guide or a blueprint for a larger conversation among all the stakeholders, be it the elected officials, the business community, nonprofit community, community leaders. And what we really found is that, particularly coming out of COVID, which had a tremendous impact in the South Bronx, as it did in all neighborhoods really across our state. But we see a resurgence. It gets back to that word of resilience. So the jobs numbers had been growing in the South Bronx area prior to COVID. Then COVID, obviously, because of the close down, the jobs went down. But we're up to about 78,000 private sector jobs in the community. And it's definitely back on an upswing. That is reducing slightly the level of poverty in the community as well. More work needs to be done there. But we talked about the different kinds of activity, a lot of growth in healthcare and social assistance. We focused on the importance of Hunts Point market, all the markets, but particularly talking about the produce market and the plans to modernize it to a state-of-the-art facility. Quality jobs, union jobs, but also the issue of food insecurity is a big issue in so many of our communities. And Hunts Point is feeding the entire city, really feeding the entire region. So what an important resource that is there. But, I think the report also pointed out, while we're seeing economic progress, job growth, there's still some challenges out there. Housing is a big issue, housing affordability. And a very high percentage compared to other neighborhoods of people being rent burdened, over 30% of their household income going to rent. I think the percentage was like at 60%. So that housing affordability issue is a key one. And in terms of health impacts, again, made worse by COVID, even prior to COVID, when you look at some of the stats on asthma rates, hypertension, heart-related illness, South Bronx had higher percentage. So that still is a concern, how we deal with those issues. So, the report, I think, was an honest assessment, but when you consider the legacy of the past of South Bronx having a negative connotation, I think what our report validates is that the work over many years by many people, elected officials, community leaders, community organizations, there has been a turnaround, and we should celebrate that and recognize, though, that more work needs to be done. And that's why I hope our report will help to guide what the next steps are so that resurgence can continue. But it really does get back to, just as the team here is what's key to this facility, what's key to the South Bronx are the people, the resilience of the people that have stayed here through challenging times and are celebrating now the progress. Newcomers that are here, a significant part of the population, about 32%, are immigrants, largely from Latin America and the Caribbean. And what we found in many of the neighborhoods across the city when we do these snapshots, neighborhoods with a high percentage of immigrant population are the ones that see a great amount of economic vitality because of the sense of entrepreneurship, wanting to have their own version of the American dream. So we see a lot of positives. Challenges, absolutely. We had our Bronx Borough President there, Vanessa Gibson, and she's into so many different initiatives to really keep this progress going, and all the elected officials who participated. So I hope it will leave everyone with a positive feeling, but still recognizing more work needs to be done.
And speaking of that work that needs to be done, let's talk about those areas for improvement and how, as a city, how do we begin to move forward?
Well, it really has to start with partnership, more partnership and collaboration. And I think you've had a fair amount of that. Some of the health issues are related to the environment. Certainly when you talk about an issue like asthma rates, as an example. So I think coming up with the final part of the money to upgrade the produce market at Hunts Point, because of, truck traffic and so on, and contributing to pollution, that is one tangible area. Senator Jose Serrano was there, and he had just announced with folks from the state Department of Environmental Conservation, I think it was $3.5 million new initiative as far as environmental health focus, for the region. So taking advantage of opportunities for more funding from the state, from the city. Obviously, in recent years with COVID, you saw a lot of federal money come into the community as well. not all that money's been spent down, although a lot of it has been, but making sure the money that still is there is targeted. Education, obviously, is always an important issue. And I think one of the advantages the Bronx broadly has is the higher education sector, all the colleges and the universities. President DeFilippis was there from Hostos. And Hostos has, not to plug one, because I know you're Lehman, right?
I am a Lehman graduate.
So I don't want to pick,
That's okay.
not picking, favorites here. But Hostos certainly, as the president likes to brag, has had a transformational impact in terms of access to higher education for young people in the community. So continuing to make sure those investments are there. So there's a lot underway, but and some of it may not sound like something new, but it's just keeping it going and making sure we're not moving backwards. And I think that's what the overall challenge we're facing right now at the federal level, the state level, the city level, because we're in a less certain economic time. Mm-hmm. And, we know in terms of the city budget, even the state budget, clearly not as much money there as perhaps was there a year or two ago, right? The federal COVID money is being spent down. And I think the expectation was with all the federal investment, the economy would pick up dramatically with tax revenue making up for as that money's spent down. Well, some of that's happened, but in recent times, with the high interest rates and inflation, all of that, it's dampened some of what was expected as far as economic resurgence. The good news is we're still adding jobs. People are still spending money. Sales tax collections, as we report, keep going up. But there's definitely a more challenging budget picture at the city and the state level. So I think the value of what we were saying points out where we need to protect some of those past investments that are finally, paying some important dividends, and make sure that even if we have tougher budgets, tougher balance to put in place, that we not go backwards in terms of investments that have made a difference in communities like the South Bronx all across the city.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything you said in terms of moving forward and partnership, I think is amazing and it's exceptional. Now, when we come back from the break, we have about a minute left before we go.
Okay.
When we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit about unclaimed funds.
Oh,
so
good.
if you can tell our viewers in a nutshell, because they don't want to miss this, they don't want to miss how they can claim their own. Can you just give us a nutshell of what is an unclaimed fund?
An unclaimed fund is basically, we'd call it lost money that someone got separated from. Usually it's an old bank account that went dormant or a check that was never cashed. After a certain period of time under the law, it's turned over to our office for safekeeping until we find the rightful owner or they find us.
Well, like I said, you don't want to miss it. So it's time to take a quick break. But when we return, we will continue our conversation with New York State Comptroller Thomas Dinapoli. Stay tuned. Only 57% of New York City high school students are college ready by their senior year. "55% of high school graduates either have no plans to attend college or are uncertain that they will ever attend. "34% of young adults don't go to college because they can't afford it. Discover what's possible. BronxNet's education programs, internships, and opportunities help engage and inspire Bronx youth and beyond to pursue their passions. Be a part of the BronxNet family. Whether you're interested in our shows, joining a class, or donating to support our mission, visit BronxNet.org to learn more. Welcome back. You're watching a new edition of In the District with New York State Comptroller Thomas Dinapoli. Let's get back into it. So before the break, we talked a little bit about unclaimed funds. You gave us a little snapshot of what they were. Now, currently, New York has $18.4 billion in unclaimed funds. How does that happen?
Well, it happens more often than not, and usually in a very simple way. I'll give you an example. I mentioned, right before the break, sometimes an old bank account, like an old savings account. I had the personal experience where I had a savings account. It was actually the first bank account I ever had as a kid when I had my first job when I was a teenager. And I never wanted to close the account because I had a sentimental attachment to it. And I had moved, and I didn't really use the account that much. I only had like a few $100s in there. So there was no activity in the account. And after a certain period of time, the bank then looks at that and says, well, there's no activity, it's a dormant account. And they're required under the law to try to contact the owner. And if they can't contact you, they turn it over to the state controller's office as unclaimed funds. Well, although I had moved, my address changed, my phone number hadn't changed. So they actually called me because people see the legal notices sometimes in the papers, all these names, because that's what they're required to do before they turn over an account to us. And they called and they said, we're looking for Tom Dinapoli. I said, let's see, well, we have this money, we're turning over to the state controller's office. I said, well, that'd be pretty embarrassing if you do that. But because I had no activity, they said, look, we'll keep the account, but you've got to use it. So the message really was, whatever account you have, keep it active by using it. And if you move, make sure you give them your corrected contact information, because what often happens is there's no activity, people move, and the financial institution, in this case it was a bank, they don't know how to reach you. And we're a pretty mobile society. Most folks don't have the same address their entire life. So same thing with different other kind of financial accounts. I mentioned also before the break a check that wasn't cashed. So you could have like an old security deposit with a utility. Maybe you had a health insurance check. Again, for whatever reason, never got cashed. You're not aware of it. And again, the institution that issued that check, they have to turn it over to the state at some point. So it's all in compliance with the law. And you mentioned over $18 billion. Now, those are the accounts. We actually don't have $18 billion because the legislature appropriates that money. We keep enough in reserve. And at our press conference, we mentioned that with the addresses that we could identify, there's over $118 million just for the Bronx alone. So this is in the name of individuals, organizations, right? Businesses, nonprofits, churches, mosques, synagogues. It's also accounts that are in the name of people who may have passed away. So we always say to folks, when you search our database, not only put in your name or any organization you're attached to, but perhaps you have a parent or grandparent that passed away, you might be entitled to that money if you're the rightful heir. So the bottom line is this: you should go to our website, whatever your search engine is, put in New York State Controller. You can search online, you could apply for it online. If there's a quick match, you can get the money back in a matter of days. We return about $1.5 million a day to New Yorkers. We want to return even more. So I hope your viewers will go to New York State Controller website, click on unclaimed funds. It'll tell you how to search. Also has an 800 number there if you want to call and talk to somebody about it. But we want to return the money. So I hope your viewers, if they remember nothing else of what I've said in our chat, unclaimed funds. We want to return your money. And we gave some money back to some organizations at our press conference today that we found.
That's amazing. And I was going to, ask you, because life does pass us by. Sometimes we don't really know that we have unclaimed funds, like you mentioned, checks that were never cashed, things like that. You just never know. So thank you for mentioning how you can, go to claim them. Now, after they sign up to claim their funds, what is that retrieval process like? How long does it take?
If it's a quick match, it's really maybe a week, maybe even less sometimes, maybe a little bit more. And you could do it right online, privacy of your own home. We also go to a lot of community events, often with other elected officials where we have staff there with a computer terminal. But you don't have to go to a community event, you can go right online. Where it sometimes takes a little longer and we need more documentation is a situation where it's an estate. So if you've got, a relative that passed away and you're the rightful heir, we're going to need a death certificate, we're going to need some kind of validation that you're the rightful heir to that money. So sometimes that takes a little longer. But again, that's where that 800 number is important, because people should just call. Our staff will walk you through what it is you need to do. We have to be mindful of identity theft, because people always try to scam. So sometimes people say, why do I have to give so much information? Well, if it's an inherited situation, we don't want someone taking advantage and taking your money. But believe me, most of the matches happen pretty simply online. I think we're up to over 85% of our returns are done right online. When I started as controller, you had to either send something in by mail or by phone. So we've really made it user-friendly. It's a very fast process. And I always say, because you never know when you may get separated from money, check periodically. Check a couple times a year. If you have a business, check every quarter, we always say, or a nonprofit, because you just never know. Because right, if the check was never cashed, let's say it got lost in the mail, you wouldn't have known.
Right.
In many cases. So, yeah, check periodically. It's a fun thing to do. If you can't sleep at 2 a.m, go to the controller's website, read our reports, look for unclaimed funds, and you get very popular with friends and family. If you see their names in there and you call them and say, hey, I was just on the website, I saw your name, you can apply for this money.
Well, now I know what I'm doing the next time I can't sleep.
Good.
But let's shift gears and talk about the City Agency Tracker. You launched the new agency services monitoring tool. Tell us a little bit about it and its overall goal.
Well, our office is very much about transparency, because we think being transparent is how you promote accountability. And I think people are concerned about that these days. So the agency tracker is really meant to provide useful information to citizens, consumers, residents of the city as to what each agencies are doing, how they're meeting their service objectives. I think especially because it's a tougher time with the city budget, it becomes very important. So again, go to our website. That's where you find the information on the tracker. We try to put as much data on the website in terms of reports. We do audits, of city agencies and state agencies. And the tracker the agency tracker is new. It complements. We also have a federal COVID relief tracker, that we update on a monthly basis. So we're really trying with real-time data to give the public as much information as possible. So the city agency tracker is our newest initiative.
Like you mentioned, it promotes transparency, it promotes accountability, and I think that is so important. So let's just discuss a little bit, something when I was back doing research was the importance of performance management, especially here in New York City. So can you kind of elaborate on that?
Well, I think it's an important question that we don't spend enough time on, because, very often we get, especially when there's, a crunch on the money, we sometimes look at, what's the tax revenue, what's in the budget, and then we get into this debate of, cutting a program, adding to a program, raising taxes. We need to do a better job of looking at actual performance. What are the metrics? What are the analytics? Are we getting the best return on the money? And can we be smarter in how we're spending the money? Because you don't always have to, if you're having a money crunch, you don't always have to cut a program. Maybe if you're a little smarter about where you deploy the money, how you deploy the staff. So measuring performance, I think, is important. And if a program is not meeting its performance goals, you got to state the goals, and then you got to measure how you're meeting the goals. Maybe you have to change some of how that program is working. Maybe some of the programs have outlived their usefulness, and there's a way to redeploy. And I think it applies to almost any agency. We spend a lot of time looking at the MTA. Because the subways and the buses and the trains are a very important resource for our economy, for our community. So, pressing the MTA in terms of their performance metrics is something that that's a tangible example of something that, I think is how you measure improvement and how you measure performance. So I think my experience is that's something government doesn't always do as well as it should. And I think, again, because resources are a bit more limited these days, it becomes more important than ever to do that.
Absolutely. Now, Comptroller, let me tell you, throughout the past 20-something minutes, we've discussed so much about what we're seeing here in the South Bronx, what we're seeing in New York City. But let's talk about what got you here, right? Let's talk a little bit about your journey. So I read a little bit. Tell me what the journey was like. I know at 18 years old, you were the youngest one to hold public office. So just tell me, what sparked that interest? What made you want to, pursue this career path?
Well, I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, a time of great tumult and division in our country over a lot of issues, movements, civil rights, environmental movement, women's movement, what was called the gay liberation movement, the fight against the draft, the Vietnam War, you name it, it was happening. The political upheaval, the assassinations, all the things that were happening back then. And so as a young person, I kind of felt you couldn't sit on the sidelines. and I wanted to be involved. And I first got involved at the school level. I was involved with student government and going to school board meetings. And the year I was a senior in high school was the year the voting age was lowered to 18. So I registered to vote, and we had school board elections, and I said, maybe one of us should run instead of always letting the older folks do it. So I had the very unique experience of the very first time I voted. I voted for myself in a school board election when I was a senior in high school in May of 1972, so now you can figure out how old I am. And I had a wonderful experience that the people in my community actually voted for me, which is, in retrospect, now that I'm much older than 18, I'm amazed that they actually did it. So it showed me that you can, if you step forward and you offer some ideas in an honest and thoughtful way, people might actually listen to you. And so for me, it gave me a sense that electoral politics, that's at a very community level, Board of Education. I grew up and still live on Long Island. We elect our Board of Education trustees. That really is what set me on the path to say that elective office is a way to make a difference. Because I grew up at a time where you needed to make a difference. And to a certain extent, we're back to that kind of time. You look at the divisions that are out there, all the issues that are tearing us apart, real concern about the political process not working like it should. So I kind of feel like it's come full circle, and I'm glad I still have a seat at the table to try to make a difference. Being controlled is a little different. I served for a long time in the state legislature. I know you have a lot of state assembly members and senators as your guests as well. And that was a wonderful experience being a legislator, advocate for my community. This role is a little different, but it's an important one, try to have a positive impact.
Absolutely. Comptroller Dinapoli, I want to thank you so much. This was a perfect way to end the conversation also. Like you mentioned, we are in a time where we're seeing the youth having to step up and kind of take control. Unfortunately, there is once again a lot of division. So with that, I want to thank you for kind of giving us that tidbit, and thank you overall for joining us today.
Thank you, Brittany, very much.
I also want to thank everyone for watching, and remember, you can always watch this program anytime, anywhere on BronxNet.org and also BronxNet's channel on YouTube. Be sure to share the link with others. And while you're there, make sure to follow BronxNet on social media to find out who will be the next leader we'll sit down with on In the District from BronxNet's Media and Technology Studios at La Central in the South Bronx. Talk soon.